If you're toiling away in your garage, building a custom motorcycle on your own, but you're stuck and need help, then head over to my website and sign up for my free technical newsletter series. We're talking about paint, mechanical, electrical, metalworking and restoration techniques, all the things that you need to build a motorcycle at home. Head over there, sign up today and get started. Okay, so you can see I've just drilled, these are, I don't know, 5/16 or something, these holes. So once the slug gets hammered in here and goes past that hole, then actually I'll mark these to the depth that they've got to be inserted, and then we'll hammer them in, and then we can plug weld that, and that'll keep the slug in place. Okay, so you can see you've just welded the slugs in on both sides, plug welded. Just trimmed down the hoop to the final dimensions. I should actually trim a bit off the ends of these because they were riding up and around the corner on the hoop and causing it to be misaligned. So I'm just planning on sitting that there. Let me put this camera down for a second. Grab a couple of welding magnets and use those to align this guy here in the position that we want it, and I can tack weld it into position and finish weld it off. Okay, so we've quickly tack welded on the hoop, and I also want to get a bracket in place to bolt through into the pan, because I need to know where these holes are going to be so that I can weld nuts on the inside of the pan. So I just want to get this crossbar on. I think I'm going to use the existing holes at the front of the frame here. They're tapped and threaded. I think there's a weld nut or something on there, but there's a thread there, so I'm going to drill that out and be able to bolt back up from the bottom into the pan at the front and the rear, and those four positions will hold the pan in place. And then once that's been covered, you know, that'll be covered up, and that'll secure the seat pan onto the frame. So that's the general layout and how it looks at this point. So there's still a fair bit of cleaning up to do on the frame, but I've got to get the pan done because that's got to go back to the client so we can get it covered as the next step. So let's crack on, get some sheet steel out and make up a pan. Okay, so we've cut up a piece of, I've just used some 2mm steel. You could use probably 2mm or more, 2 or 3. I had a piece of 2 lying around. I don't think I'd use anything lighter. I don't think it'd give you enough support. So my opinion, and just an opinion, is 2mm or more. So I've got to do a few operations. I've got to put a bend in it here where it kicks up, and I've got to cut the profile, and I've got to drill the holes for the mounting point, and then weld on some studs, and then give a quick coat of paint before I send it off to have the upholstery done, or the client does. So the way I'm going to do this is, first thing I'm going to do is put the bend in, because if I cut the profile and then I put the bend in and it's 1mm or 2mm out, then it'll stuff everything up. So, and don't ask me how I know that. So I'm going to put the bend in first. So I've measured back from about where I can see the bend starting. It's not really clearly defined. There's a couple of wrinkles in the tube, so I'd say they've just clamped it, heated it and bent it, or maybe bent it cold. So we're just going to have to wing it a little bit. So I've measured about, I reckon it's about 6.5 inches from this back edge here. So that'll be a bit long, and that's okay. We can trim it down as one of the last operations, but I want to get the bend in first, and then we'll work out the rest of it from there. So I'm going to work off here, 6.5 back, put a line on here, and then put it in the Magna bender here and put a bend on it. So I've used my digital protractor and set up on the frame here, and I reckon it's like 160, so that's a 20-degree bend off flat. So I've got to set my bend to 20 degrees, and let's see how we go. Okay, so mark down 6.5 inches. I've just used a cheap marker, black marker. I buy cheap ones because they don't last long when you draw on dirty, oily steel, so they're only good for a few uses. So just get cheap ones. And then I prefer to scribe a line on the mark. I don't really like using a Sharpie. Sharpie's about, you know, a couple of millimeters thick, the line, so this to me is a bit more crisp and probably easier to line up. So let's get it going. So now we've set the angle on the bender. Done. Okay, so the shape of the bike and the tank pose a couple of extra challenges, and you can see on the marks on the tank, hopefully in the camera, where the seat used to fit. And I've put this piece of tape here before I took the original seat off, and really the cushion finished way up here, and it covered this rear tank mounting bolt. And we want to try and do something similar on the new pan. So I think what I'll end up doing is on this pan, we'll notch out a chunk of the pan to clear this, and then we'll build a small cover that will cover this mounting point, and that will allow the upholstery guys, hopefully, to upholster right up to the tank. So we're going to have to make something so that the upholstery can sit or be glued to it that follows the approximate contour of the old seat. So I'm not planning on cutting up the old seat, so we're just going to have to fabricate something that does a similar job. So I'm going to start marking this out. I'm literally going to just undo this tank mount bolt, jack the tank up with a block of wood, sit this on the frame, and then from underneath just trace the outline of the frame on the bottom of the pan. Then we'll rough cut it, and then we'll probably file or sand it to the final shape to make it exact. And yeah, let's get on with it. Okay, so here's our pan, and here's a center line of the pan. So that's the same center line that the tank mounting bolt will be on, and here's the rubber buffer or pad. So what I'm going to do is just center that over the mark where the hole or the mounting pin is, trace around that with a thick marker that's got, this one's got a chisel point, so it's maybe 4 or 5 millimeters thick, and then I'm going to basically cut this line off, and then that way, in theory, I'll give myself a few millimeters clearance around this rubber pad. So let's go chop that out. Okay, I'll try and make this as quick and as accurate as possible. I'm just going to use a hole saw to take out that part there, and then 2 cuts with the angle grinder on the plate, and that'll notch out the rest of it. So I'm just looking at what hole saws I've got in stock. These are 38 and these are 44 millimeters, or whatever the imperial equivalent is. And if I use that one, I think it might be a little on the small side. This one might be a bit more than what I wanted, but I'm not going to go down to the store to buy a hole saw that's in between these two. So I'm going to use the one that's slightly larger. And I mean, I could use this one, but I'd end up probably filing out the slot for a bit of time, so I'm going to try and avoid that. So I'm just going to use the larger one. Go with that. Okay, so I've clamped the seat pan onto a piece of plywood, so I'm going to drill through into the plywood. That's the sacrificial piece, and I clamped it onto the bench. I don't want this spinning around and moving. I could use a drill press, but it'll take me longer to set it up. So I've just drilled a 1/8 of an inch pilot hole for the centering drill on the hole saw. So that's about 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter. I've just drilled a little pilot hole for that to follow, and then the hole saw will follow the centering drill. So let's cut this out. Okay, so here's the general idea so far. We've notched this out to suit the rear tank mount. Obviously we've got a lot of wires in the way, which we'll be careful about, but the idea will be that that will sit in there. And make sure we line this up with the fold and center it around the rear tank mount, and now we can trace out the outline from underneath and trim this to shape. Okay, so just having set the pan on the frame, just roughly traced around the outline of the frame. Obviously that's around the back of the hoop, and also marked in the two holes that I've transferred from the bracket here. So I'm just going to straighten up these lines with a ruler and center punch these holes here and drill them out and cut these off and start trimming this, and then I'll come back and I'll bolt the pan down, and then we can just tidy it up and check the fit. So these 2 points will always locate the pan in the correct location. So well, that's the idea anyway. So, and I'll be able to mark the front holes and fix those down, and then once that's done, the pan's fixed in its place, then we can just do the final tidy up and make sure it's all symmetrical and tidy and even and everything else. Alright, so having bolted the seat pan down, I've just gone around and double checked the mark around the hoop, and I've adjusted that a couple of times so there was lines everywhere. So for the purpose of the video, I've just shaded it in, so that's going to be my trimming line now, and I've just adjusted these a little bit just to narrow it, just to make it parallel or consistent all the way around. So obviously this is dependent on how accurately you can hold a pen, a Sharpie, around this curve. So your eye's pretty good at picking up, you know, if it's not even or it's not symmetrical about the center. So now that I've coloured in a bit and stood and looked at it, it looks pretty good to the eye, so it should look okay on the bike. So it's time to go and trim these to these edge of these black lines now, and then I can bolt the pan down again, mark the front holes and put some front holes in as well, and that should suffice for getting the pan bolted down. Okay, so we're looking pretty good here now, and I'm going to re-bolt this down to the frame. Now I've drilled these 8mm and I'm using 6mm bolts. So, and I've drilled these ones quarter, which is 6.25mm. So there's a little bit of play, and that's intentional, a little bit of play between the bolt and this hole. There's 1/4mm there, and there's 2mm there. So what I can do is just get the nuts on, and then because this hole's 2mm bigger, I've got a little bit of wiggle room here, and I can line this up exactly where I want it, and then I can tighten the nuts down, and then I can drill the front two holes, and at some point I can also weld these two nuts from this side, so this will hold them in position, and then I can just put 3 tack welds on these nuts and they'll never go anywhere, and then they'll be covered over with the upholstery, the foam and then the upholstery, and it should be very repeatable to locate this back on the bike and screw it on. So that's the intent anyway. It seems to work okay. I've done this a few times now, so, and it's neat too, so there's no bolts or anything from the bottom except for the heads. So, and it's simple to do. You just put a couple of bolts up from the bottom, and again there's just small metric 6mm bolts. So now I've got that in place, I can mark the front ones, drill them out, and I think I'm going to make just out of a piece of sheet, I think I might try and roll a bit of sheet over a big piece of pipe and just make a little cowl here and then weld it on, and then that'll hopefully give the upholstery guys a chance to upholster right up to the edge of the tank and cover this pretty ugly tank mount. Okay, so we've got all the 4 mounting points done, and the final job for the pan is to cover up this pretty ugly, manky looking tank mount, and we want to get somewhere up here so we can upholster right up to the tank and cover this up. So what I'm going to attempt to do, and I haven't done this before, so we'll see how it goes, see it live on YouTube, is I've got just a scrap of pipe here, and the right diameter here, 90mm, just to cover up this tank bracket, which is 90mm as well. So what I'm going to do is get some 1.6mm steel and roll it over this piece of tube or pipe, and then just cut it so that it will sit as a cowl over here, and then we can shape it up around the tank, and hopefully that will give us the desired result. So let's go see how we go. Okay, so I've mucked around with a piece of cardboard for a few minutes, and I think the shape needs to be something like this, and that will give me a cover for that engine fuel tank mount. So we'll go and cut this out of a piece of flat steel. Actually, we'll cut a bigger piece first. It'll be easy to roll it, and then cut that shape out of the roll piece. So we'll go do that now. Okay, so here we go. Here's the pan done, ready to go back to the client. So this is what this front corner looks like to cover this bolt. So this bolt sticks up around about 35mm above the frame. So you'd have to change this fuel tank mount for something completely different if you wanted a really flat seat on here. So this is going to do to cover up that bolt, and hopefully the upholstery guys can just blend up into this area here to get the effect that the client's looking for. So there you go, that's how you do this custom seat pan and a hoop on an SR400. And if you've got any questions or comments, stick them down below, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Okay, so it's been a couple of weeks since the last video, and the seat's come back from the upholsterer. I just wanted to show you how it looks when it's finished. So for you people in Melbourne, this was done by Aaron at Weird Upholstery, and go check him out on Instagram and Facebook. I'll put some links down below. But as usual, beautiful job. Thank you, Aaron. So in conversation with the client, they've obviously decided to cut off that little cover we made for this rear engine mount. So there wasn't a whole lot of space here, and that was the reason we made that cover in the first place. But Aaron's been able to get away with shaping the foam to cover that bolt. So done a great job, looks fantastic. So you can see that that just slides, that recess just sits over the top of the bolt there, no modifications required. So come up pretty good, didn't it? Looks great, good lines, great fit, and fantastic job by Aaron. So check him out if you're in Melbourne, and thanks for watching the video.